Uh, Rav Nachum, I don't know if people saw this. Rav Nachum sent out a set of questions on our topic, and he actually sent me a set of answers. I disagree with a few of his answers, but that's okay. So God willing, we will get to it. But I wanted to start before we do that, like just like go through the Shulchan Aruch. That's our main goal, and our secondary goal is of Nachum's questions, because I think they're very helpful in getting to the root of the halacha. And then and maybe we'll then go back and do some of the Nose Kalim as well. So it's a little bit different order than how we do things, but let's go for it. So with that, Isaac, you were here first. We're going to Shulchan Aruch Siman Kuf Birya Afilu Be'elef Lo Batil. I don't know. By the way, important to say, I don't think the Mechaber put on the headers for the Shulchan Aruch. I think it was a later edition. So don't be fooled by those. They're not original to the author. But all right, Isaac, take it away. Birya.
Okay, Birya
actually, the same thing with the Rama. I looked at it then with the Rama, so it's the same thing. It wasn't him who put it there. It was somebody else later.
So, but good. All right, take it away, Isaac.
Okay, Birya dehaino kegon nemala. או עוף טמא וגיד הנשה ועבר מן החי וביצה שיש בה הפרוח וכיוצא בהן אפילו באלף לא בטלה ואין לו דין בריה אלא אם כן הוא דבר שהיה בו חיות לאפוקי חיטה אחת של איסור וכן צריך שיהיה דבר שאסור מתחילת בריאתו לאפוקי עוף טהור שנית נבל ושור הנסכל וכן צריך שיהיה דבר שלם שאם יחלך אין שמו עליו לאפוקי חלב וכן צריך שיהיה שלם. Okay.
Good.
Okay, so Birya. Examples are an ant, a tamei bird, gid hanashe, ever min hachai, and an egg with a chicken fetus or whatever you call it in it.
Great.
And things like that. And they're never batel even in 1,000, 1 to 1,000. And the requirements for it being birya are that it's something that has like aliveness, which means that a single grain of wheat doesn't count.
Yeah, it doesn't have chiyut, right? Whatever.
Well, it seems as though, based on everything we've read, that animals have chiyut, but plants do not.
Exactly. That's I think the case. I think you got it exactly. Is that it has to be part of something that maybe isn't rooted in the earth or something. I'm not 100% sure why plants and not animals, but I saw that somewhere. Not all plants, of course, are rooted in the earth, but let's go for it for the moment. So,
I mean, I also think like they may just have a different concept of aliveness than we do. I mean, I'm not sure how many. I can't think of an example in classic sources in which I hear like a plant referred to as like chaya. Although that I could totally be missing something.
Great.
It looks like this, like Aristotelian division, like tzomeh, chai, like
that's true.
So, but all right, good. Keep going.
So it needs to be something that's a sur from like the moment it's created, so like from the get-go, and that's to exclude tahor bird that became nevela, right? Because it was mutar when it was created, or rather it was potentially mutar, however you want to put that. We talked about that. But then when it becomes nevela, then it's aser. Or shor haniskal, which is only aser from the moment that it's stoned. And it also needs to be an entire thing, that if it's divided, you call it something else. So for example, chalev is not included in that because it's always called chalev, even if you cut it up. And it also needs to be something that's complete, which is like another part of the chalev. I mean, Rav Nachum and I had a kind of like debate on this. I think that that's like a fourth categorization, that like the thing itself has to be shalem, but like and not, it has to be something that's like all in one place, and that's why chalev is excluded, because chalev is distributed across an animal, but like ever.
Good. First off, like since you brought up who's the one who, right, this list is based on the Ran, right? The Ran's the one who's, I'll say it. The Ran's the one who says it has to be, is the Ran who says, or is the Rosh? The Rosh, I think, says that it has to be in one place, and therefore this Chalev is not. But yeah, I actually think this is 4 categories, right? Because you can imagine that it has to be something that only has its name when it's Shalem, but when it's broken up, it's still Iberia, right? It's just and he says it has to still be in that state of being Shalem as well. So that's the 3.5 categories, let's call it, of the Beit Yosef. So everyone feel good about that? Should I say? I'm going to say them again just in case, right? Based on again on the Ran originally, right? So Iberia, it has to have, let me call it life force, something like that, right? Which seems to exclude plants. Although it does include parts of animals, right? Every mina chai, gira nashe, and so forth. It needs to have started out as an isur, and so therefore, an of tahor, our kosher animal that is then, becomes a nevela or treifa, doesn't count. And it needs to be something that keeps its name, that only has its name when it's whole. And so if you cut it up, it loses its name. Maybe it becomes a piece of such and such and not the thing itself. And it has to still be in its wholeness state, right? So you cut the leg off an ant, it's no longer a birya. Okay, those are the categories of birya. Any questions on those? Anybody remember what the Tosfot's categories were?
Categories? This is what was that it's got to be sorry.
No, say it, Yavni, say it.
That it's that it has to be that the Isul is like stated as a thing in the Torah as opposed to, yeah.
Exactly. And Shalem was also part of it has to still be the whole thing, was also in the Tosfot. But yeah, so that's why I said categories. That those seem to be the 2 categories of the Tosfot. But the main thing in the Tosfot is that it's called out explicitly as a shame and not as an adjective, right? That's at least the way the Rosh understands the Tosfot. So I wanted to. He uses the term shem etzem. I'll get the vowels right there. But good. Any questions about that? Just the Tosfot versus the Shulchan Aruch, right? Who's copying the Ran here, or at least basing himself on the Ran. Okay, good. Isaac, finish up the Haggah for us.
Oh yeah. Ve'ikar gid hanashe eno ela al hakaf bilvad v'hu kerochav arba etzbaot, pardon me. Ve'im hu shalem mikri birya. Okay, so in the case of Gid Hanashe, it only is the part that's on like the hip socket, I think it is. And that is only 4 fingers wide. And if you have the entirety of that 4-finger length, width, whatever you call it, then it's called a birya. So I guess if you have some part of it, it's not birya, or if you have a different part of Gid Hanashe. Yeah. I guess once you're past that 4 fingers width area, it's like not Gid Hanashe, it's some other Gid.
If I remember correctly, I've seen, it's been a while since I've seen a picture of it. Maybe someone will pull one up. There's actually a bunch of sinews going on in that area. And it's like not so clear how far are we talking about all of them. They're like wrapped around each other. And in fact, if you actually look, the Be'er Hetev has it. We don't have to look at this right now. He says that only is for a big, ox or a cow. And actually, if we're talking about, a daka, a behema daka, then it might be less than that, than the Rama saying there.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
May I ask a question?
Please.
Is he saying this because with the Gid Hanashe is more difficult to know the whole thing of Shalem? What does it mean to be Shalem?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's not so clear. Well, how much is actually the Gid, and when is it still Shalem? If I only have 2 finger breaths, I may have cut up the Gid at that point, right? Just finger lengths probably, but so yeah, it's not so clear what is the Gid, especially right nowadays. We don't even serve those parts in at least in the U.S. In Israel, you could probably get it, right? You can't get kosher filet mignon as far as I know for that reason, because nobody really feels like they're expert enough to take out the Gid. So you have to take it out. It's a halacha, but they get rid of it. They're not going to put ourselves in that safek. So
just to be clear, this is being machmir, right? Saying that it's because it's even only part of it counts as a whole.
Yeah. I mean, they could be lakil.
Could be lakil also,
right? You know,
because if you find part of the rest of the gid could be not.
Wouldn't be a birya, right? At that point, right? If you have less than this amount, you've cut up the gid, and therefore it could be batel potentially.
Right, but if you had said that it's like the whole gid, anyway, fine, yeah,
you're right. It could be both leachmir and leakel, right? In both directions. So, at least as far as I'm understanding it. So, good. All right, Bet Yavni, you're next on my screen, so take Bet.
דבר שהוא בריאה שנתבשל עם ההיתר, אם אינו מכירו, הכל אסור. והרוטב בנותן טעם. ואם מכירו, זורקו, והאחרים והרוטב צריך שיהיה בהם 60 כנגדו. Should I translate or is that?
We'll do the chutz b'gidam sheh after, so do that for the moment.
So what are the rule about this? Is that if it's cooked with heter, if you can't recognize it, then everything is asur. It's never batel. And if it's cooked with heter and you can't find it, then all of the heter that it's confused with and you can't find it with is asur, and you can separate that out. And the rotev that's left, then the rotev is determined by whether it could have given taste in all of the heter. And if you can recognize the birya, then you throw it out, and everything else is determined by taste.
Right. So you have a piece of ever min achai, right, and it falls into your soup with chunks of meat in it that look like ever min achai but aren't the ever min achai, and you have soup, right? So the soup is, if you can get rid of the pieces of meat, then the soup just needs 60 against the piece. But the pieces of meat can never, doesn't matter if you have thousands of pieces of meat against that piece of ever min achai, it's all asur because it's a birya. But of course, if you find it, you can take it and throw it out, and then you just need 60 against the amount of it again, and not right. So, okay, good. Any questions, thoughts about that? Things that weren't clear? Things I said wrong? Okay, keep going, Yavni.
חוץ מגיד הנשה, שאין טעמו אוסר, דאין בגידים ונותן טעם. So except for the gid hanashe that doesn't have flavor to make something asur, and aval shmano oser v'tzarich 60 kenegdo להתיר הרוטב. And therefore, what you actually have to, but the fat around the gid can make something asur, and therefore you need 60 against the fat. לפיכך ירח שנתבשל עם גידו, אם מכירו זורקו. וכל השאר מותר, אם יש בו 60 כנגד שמנו. ואם אינו מכירו, כל החתיכות אסורות, ואם יש בקדירה 60 כנגד השומן, מותר הרוטב, ואם לאו אסור. So, for example, if you have the whole thigh that was cooked with the gid in it, if you know which thigh it was mixed in with other thighs, then you can take it out, and everything else is permitted as long as there was enough in the whole pot against just the fat of the gid of the problematic yerech. But if you can't recognize it, then all of these pieces of meat are now asur, and anything else that was in the pot, if there's enough in all of the heter against just the fat of the gid, then whatever else was in the pot, i.e. the sauce, is permitted. Great. And if not, it's asur. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then v'im nimoach.
V'im nimoach hagid ve'eno nikar tzarich gam ken 60 kenegdo. On the other hand, if the gid itself, not talking about the fat, if the gid itself has like melted and disappeared, then we need 60 against the gid. Now, presumably, it's not a birya anymore. So
exactly, right, because this is right. This violates now the shlemut requirement, or doesn't violate. It no longer holds up to the shlemut requirement of the Shulchan Aruch, right, and therefore it loses its birya status.
right. But even though we don't think it has taste, we still need to batel its mass.
Exactly, beautiful, because it's particularly called out by the Torah, right? This one has even Gita is like the exception of not having any. It's the exception to the Tam rule, I would say, in some ways, right? Even though it doesn't have flavor, according to some poskim, right? There's a big debate about this, right? That nonetheless, it still needs, you still need to have bitul against it. Good. Anybody remember before, without looking, or you can look at, but we won't look yet inside. There's a big push against the Ramah in this piece. Everyone knows the absence of the Ramah here.
That he doesn't bring up Hanan.
Yes. Yeah, he doesn't. Hanan and Isur Davuk, right? That you have this Yerech, right, which has a gid in it. So like touching it, right? So that the whole thing, the whole Yerech should become Hanan, and then you should have to have 60 against the Yerech, not against the gid. They're like, what is going on here? Where's the Ramah's silence doing here? So it's a big question. There's several possible answers. I just want to throw the question out there because it reminds us of these categories. Although I actually think that I think the Shach gives this, right? The simple answer is we're not actually, when he says you cook the Yerech with the gid, it's not like you have the whole thigh in there as a whole. I think you cut it up into different pieces, and you just threw it all in and you didn't remove the gid. And so there's a piece in there with the gid, or maybe the gid is floating on its own in there. And we're not talking about the whole thigh with the gid kind of case. So that's one answer. The other possibility is the Ramah is kind of like, I'm done telling you this every time the Shulchan brings up that issue that's Hanan. Like, I told you that's the case. You better remember that. Which is, it's a good, I think Rav Nachum brought this up in Shir. Like, this is a good thing of one of the things that makes Isur v'Heter difficult, I think, is that you have to hold all these different things in your head at all times. And it's not like always explicitly called out in the Shulchan Aruch. Okay. Alish, can you read Gimel for us?
Okay. ג' גדרה של מלאך שנפל שם בריאה, שנפל שם בריאה, ונאבדה אסור הכל. That's it? Okay. So the pot with the soup where birya fell into it, so everything is forbidden.
That's you have a trail of ants that goes into your soup. And you can't find them, or you don't know how many there were, right? That's it. Soup that's it. You got birya. On the other hand, I want you to actually, here's one place I do want to see one of the Nosei Kelim. Just look at the very short Shach and Yud Asur Hakol.
So if I cannot sift it, although if I can sift it and take it out, so then it would be mutar probably.
Exactly, right. You have right in their world, you see this all over the Gemara. You have like a piece of cloth that you use to strain out the soup. Good to go. So as long as, right, obviously the holes have to be small enough. This is going to get into issues with like the flea, right? What do you do with really small things? I don't know if fleas are too small for their strainers, but maybe they are. Like, how do you deal with that? Good. And finally, Alana, you wanted to do Daled for us?
Sure. ירקות מבושלות שנמצאו בהם 3 תולעים, הירקות אסורים, אבל מי השלקות מסננן ומותרים. וכן הבצר ירחצנו ויבדקנו ומותר. So if you have boiled vegetables, and inside you find 3 like little worms, I guess. So the vegetables are asur, you can't eat them. But the water that you boiled it in, you can strain. And if you don't find any worms in the water, presumably the water is fine. And any meat cooked with those vegetables, I guess, you can rinse and check, and assuming you don't find anything, that can be mutar. So it's only the vegetables that are completely out of the question, right?
Exactly. The cleanable things, right? If you can strain it or clean it, then it's fine. And there's an assumption here that cooked vegetables, it's very hard to check.
Okay.
Check them and remove the bugs, right? After the fact. So, if you're eating at someone's house and you happen to find three bugs in your vegetables, it's a problem potentially. Don't eat the vegetables, get rid of them. It's this comes into this whole chazaka thing becomes a huge thing, right? I don't know if it's as big anymore, but there was like a time when it really blew up about in kashrut, the kashrut industry, about bug checking, and I was living in Seattle at the time, and the kosher restaurants there was one that seemed to constantly be closing or losing its hashgacha and regaining it over disputes on broccoli, and how they were checking.
Bob here still does not allow, I believe it's asparagus and blackberries.
See, that's there's an assumption that they have a chazaka of bugs. Is that the way they're doing it? It's
yes, although I mean this always brings up the question of, so were all of our ancestors just eating tripe all the time? Like this.
Good. I would very highly encourage people to take a look at the Aruch HaShulchan that I sent out. I don't know if people got a chance to see that, where he gets into this question where he says in the summer, right, there's just bugs everywhere, and they're in our flour. And the people, the good from people of the Aruch HaShulchan's world are like, they're not checking, or they're not checking enough, And he has three justifications he brings up for that. I can just, if I can remember them, but he says the first one is, remember, there's a principle that Birya is batel in 960, right? Anybody remember whose opinion that comes from the Mishnah and Trumot? But anybody remember whose opinion holds that?
Is that Rabbeinu Shimshon?
I think it might have been originally the Rashba. I think also it's in the Beit Yosef. Look, everyone flip. We can do this. Flip to the Beit Yosef in Kuf. It's towards the end of the Beit Yosef. It's actually in the it's the Rosh. Rosh writes in Gid Anasheh. Right. Look at it's in the Torah. Sorry, the Torah. The last thing in the Torah, I'll read it. In the very end of Kuf. So essentially go to Kuf Aleph. Go up. It says Yeshorim de Birya Batla B'Shameot V'Shishim. But he says Veloni here Ladini Havia Rosh. He says, but the Rosh doesn't agree. And obviously, right, the Shulchan Aruch doesn't rule that way. He doesn't mention it in the Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber. And you actually can see, if you look in the Beit Yosef, he's like, because he brings all these different sources, don't say this or don't agree with it. Actually, in fact, I'll read that too. People can see Ulinyan Halacha. It's I don't know, a good way down. I have a bold on the word ulinyan in my version. People maybe give me a thumbs up if you see that. Andrea sees it. Alana sees it. Good.
How does it start? I'm sorry.
It says ulinyan halacha.
Okay.
So maybe Andres, do you want to read that for us? Ulinyan halacha.
Sorry, I thought you mean the Beit Yosef of Yeshomrim, the Beria Batla Tatata.
Yeah, exactly. Starting with Ulinyan halacha, like towards the end of it.
I don't see it. Sorry.
All right, I'll read it slowly, and people will find it. It's not so. Ulinyan halacha, kevan shatosfot ve'arosh ve'aran maskimim le'asor ve'gam dat harif ve'rambam nir'eh ken midalohi skiro. Davar zeh hachinaktinan, right? Since you've got on one hand the Tosfot, the Rosh, and the Ran all think that the 1 in 960 doesn't work, and the Rif, the Ran, and the Rambam don't even mention it, right? We hold that there's no bitul in 960 for Birya, but the Aruch HaShulchan essentially argues. He says part one, yeah, that's not the halacha, but in certain cases where we can cling to minority opinions, and he's like, this is one of them. Maybe that's one thing. And the second thing he says is that, what's the second one? If I remember this correctly, the third one he says he actually gets this whole thing of that Birya is muse, is disgusting. The ants and bugs are disgusting, and maybe that doesn't count in that case. and I can't remember his second one, which he doesn't like as much. But go ahead and look at the Aruch HaShulchan, and he tries to justify all of this. So
The 960 is sort of like a very makel opinion, but there's like an intermediate opinion that maybe it's Batel Elif, right?
yes, yeah. So
Which like practically would be just as useful as the 960. And
960, they're
maybe
about the
more
same.
people. There's more, maybe
Yeah.
there's more reason to hold it. So
oh yeah, there's a whole other thing that you get here too, which is that bugs that spontaneously develop within the food itself may not be asur, right? Which is a whole nother thing. So I know spontaneous creation is not something that science holds these days, but it was something in their world, and that's also just another piece. This is the reason, for instance, right? You can drink water out of like watering hole, and the bugs that are in are assumed to have been generated in the water, not come in afterwards, and are potentially permitted. So they're not creepy crawlies in the same way. So was that Gemara and Chulin? I think I can't remember anymore. But so okay, good. Yeah, Alana, please. You're on mute though, so it's.
Sorry, I know it was in the Bach, but I can't remember. I know the 960 was 60 times 16, but can you remind me where we got the what the 16 is, what the significance of that?
Yeah, there's a thing about the sear of fish being batel in 16 in Shua. And so the way that's understood by some is it's 60 times 16. The fish is batel. The fish is a birya, and yeah. So,
okay.
But I don't exactly remember how they get there. It's something like that, but it's so that's how they.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Of course, it's okay. How are people feeling about this so far? Good, not good. So with that, I wanted to, maybe I'll share this. I have these questions of Rav Nachum's, and then if we have time at the end, we'll go to some of the Kelim. But let me see, share screen. Where is that? There it is. Okay, I will share my screen. People can make it Yavni sized. And I think he wrote these quickly, so we'll apologize for Rav Nachum's writing here a little bit. But let's go through these questions. I think they're pretty good. So he says, first, why, according to Rashi, Ran, and Rashba, is a non-kosher bird considered a birya, but a kosher bird that died without proper shlita is not a birya?
Because it's not nolad.
But good, right? Exactly. It's not born with the Isur on it, and therefore it gains the Isur afterwards, right? We saw that as one of the criteria. All right. Number two, the Rosh uses the examples of Chelev, Orla, and Kilayim, which are batel, even though they are forbidden from their birth, to reject Rashi and instead define birya. How? This is also the Tosfot, not just the Rosh, but anybody remember? Yavni, go for it.
isn't this what we're saying, that it's the that the Isul is explicit about the thing as opposed to about like some quality of the thing?
Exactly, right? Orla, Chelev, and Kilayim are quality of the, well, Chelev might be, the quality of the thing and not the thing itself. So Chelev might actually be outside of that. It might be
a different,
different reason. It's not in the same place or so forth. So number three, the Tosfot accept the idea that birya must have life force in it to the exclusion of wheat. Anybody remember? This is good.
No, they don't say that.
Was that a hand up from Alana or no? No, this is good. This is fun to review this stuff. But I only know this because I went through it. But it's remember the Tosfot has to deal with there's a dispute. Is it Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim? I think it is. And the Chachamim who seem to think, Rabbi Yehuda thinks that a wheat berry does have the status of birya, they don't, and they argue it's about life force. And the Tosfot's like, no, they're only arguing from Rabbi Yehuda's position, and that life force doesn't actually mean anything. So that's the reason the Tosfot disagree that life force has anything to do with it. At the end,
I think the reason that they do that is because of Gita Nashe and things like that, right? And
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it makes it much easier, right? Because Ever Minachai and Gita Nashe, that they have life force to them is a little bit weird, right? And so that you don't have to say that as awkwardly if you use the Tosfot's explanation. But good. I think the reason the Tosfot is number one left out of the Beit Yosef in general here, I don't know. I think that Tosfot is difficult, not in terms of like it's difficult to understand. I think it's just their answers a little dachuk about like it's mefurash b'Torah, right? Because you're getting into like very nuanced grammatical claims that may not hold so much water. Nevela is also mefurash b'Torah, and I don't know, is it really a description and not a noun? I don't know. So that's my own take on it. I don't know if it came off well in class when I was trying to say that or not, but that's my guess. Okay. How does the Ran differ from the Tosfot and the definition of Birya? Alice, go for it.
Yeah, I can go. He's got all these categories which the Tosfot don't have, right? Like so, the asur mitchila briyato, chiyuta, and that's it. Like those two categories, I think.
Yeah, the three. The Ran has the shleimut category,
right? But Tosfot have they too, right?
They do, exactly. So he differs in that it has to have started as an isur, and it also has to have an neshama, as be a living thing, have a life force to it. So, right, that actually is like we did number 5 now too, right? In that sense for the Ran.
Okay,
yeah. There, I think it's biryan neshama. Like, right, he thinks that that neshama is a different thing. It doesn't mean that it's a living animal, rather it's part of something that was alive, right? Good. Number 6. So the Rav Nach, I have his answers. Is really what fourth rather obvious criterion does the Beit Yosef add? I love the way he phrases this question. Avni.
That it be Shalem?
Yeah, that it's not just that its name it can only be there when it's Shalem and not when it's cut up, but it itself has to be Shalem. Rav Nachum wrote in his answers to me, he's like, I don't think this is a fourth category. This is just kind of Muvan Melav, but okay.
So I don't think I don't get it now. So what's the
good? Let me spell it out slowly. Sorry, because I think I've been confusing. So the Ran's categories are: it has to have life or life force.
Right.
That it has to have started out as an Isur, like been born as an Isur, or have been an Isur from its creation, right? Which, like an Ever Minachai, when it becomes an Ever Minachai, is an Isur, right? Its creation as a limb wasn't Asur, but its creation as an Ever Minachai was Asur. And the third category is that it has to lose its name when it's cut up, right? And category 4 is it also not only does it have to lose its name when it's cut up, but it itself still has to be whole.
Okay.
Yeah, that kind of follows though, because if it loses its name when it's cut up, then it's no longer the thing anymore once it's cut up, and therefore I think that's why Rav Nachum think that's not a fourth category. So
okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah. Did I say that well? Did I say that well enough to make sense?
Yeah. It does.
But great. Do gidim have give forbidden flavor? And what about the fat around the gid? Good. Alana's answering without even a voice, which is great. Right. Gidim do not have forbidden flavor, but the fat does. And by the way, what's the level of the isur of the fat? I'm just going to add a question.
The Rabbanan, right?
The Rabbanan, right. The Gita Nashe is that they are right. So, all right. If you have a small forbidden berry in your soup and you cannot find to remove it, what can you do, if anything, to permit at least some of the soup? Andres.
As I said, strain.
That's the shach when he says lesanen.
Exactly. You can strain it out, right? That's what you can do, assuming you have a strainer that can strain the birria. Okay. If you cooked vegetable soup and found 3 bugs from the soup, is the soup permitted?
Well, if you
Isaac, yeah, go for it. I couldn't see you. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Isaac, it's you. Go for it.
Oh, sorry. If you strain the soup, you can still eat the broth, but you can't have the vegetables. And if there was meat in it, which I don't know, maybe your vegetable soup does or doesn't have, rinse it and check it.
Exactly. Does the Rashba permit a birria 960? Someone say yes. The Rashba does permit a 960. He was the voice that permitted. And how's the Beit Yosef Paskin? Anybody remember? We just saw it.
We just read it, right?
Nope. So, all right, before we do 11, we didn't do this in class, I don't think. So I want to actually, everyone go back to the Beit Yosef in Kuf. I want to read the very end of it. I'll just give you the question. If you have well, actually, I won't even give you the question yet. Let's go ahead and read this. I don't know if people got a chance to read this on their own yet. If you go to the very end of the Beit Yosef in Kuf, it's Katav. For me, it's 4 lines up from the bottom, but I mean, you guys may have different copies. Katav Harashba b'Torata Bait Hakatzar b'Bait Daled Shar Aleph. Anybody see that?
Sorry,
Okay.
where again?
At the last Beit Yosef comment on Kuf, right, which is that long comment we were just reading part of. If you go to the very end, you have Katav Harashba. Good. Maybe let's see. Andres, did you read yet? I don't think you read.
I can read, yeah.
Yeah,
כתב
please.
הרשב"א בתורת הבית, הקסר בבית 4.
Yeah, Shard Aleph. This is the way he
okay.
organizes the Torah Tabai. By the way, I don't know if people know this, and I'm just gonna interject. Your idea in the tour is highly based on the Rashba's Torah Tabai, his organizational scheme. So, just so people know that. Anyway, keep going.
כשאומרים חתיכה שיש בה שמנו של גיד שנתבשלה בקדרה עם חתיכות של היתר, ויש בהיתר 60 לבטל את האיסור, אם נטל מן ההיתר בעוד שחתיכות האיסור חמה בתוך הקדרה, הרי היא חוזרת ואוסרת, שהרי אם נפלה לקדרה אחרת אוסרת, לפיכך צריך להיזהר שלא ייטול מן הרוטב וחתיכות ההיתר עד שיצטנן הכל.
But stop there. Stop there. This is his first claim.
So I didn't get it so well.
Good. Do you mind if I help you out? Since this is
Go ahead.
the first time, right? She says, following, you have a chaticha that has shumana gid attached to it, or maybe not attached with it, something like that, attached, right? And it's you cook it in a kedira. The shumana gid is batel, right? We learned, and you have enough that you could do bitul, right? You have enough pieces in there, it's batel. What you shouldn't do though is take anything of the heter out or anything out from that kedira of the heter until it cools down, right? What's his reason, right? Because if that piece came out of the pot and went back into another pot, it can be oser. Well, the same thing would happen in our pot. What if you take out enough heter from our pot that the Easter piece is no longer less than 1/60, right? And it's still hot. Even though it was batel, it can still be oser, right? If you reduce the amount of heter in the pot, right? So you have a piece of, this works for any Easter, right? You have a piece of Easter meat in the pot. The first thing you want to do generally is to take out the piece of meat before you take out the heter while it's hot still, because if you take out enough heter, you no longer have the ratio you want, and you now have a problem. All right, because just as that piece still has the power to oser, it still has the power to oser in that pot itself if you remove enough of the heter. That's his claim number 1.
Is that the idea of choser v'neor? Is that idea that it can, like, the Easter can reawaken? That's what we're talking about.
Good. It's a type of choser v'neor. Exactly. Usually choser v'neor is usually the way I'm used to seeing it is if I drop a second piece of Easter of the same type in the pot, then the two combine.
Right. So the shear of heter is no longer enough.
Exactly. But it's the same idea, is that the Easter kind of like never loses the asterisk by it, right? It's still even though it's mutar, even though the pot is mutar, right? It has the ability to become asur with that Easter in it. So he says, let it cool down and then remove the Easter. Okay, that's part 1. But he's like, well, what about just removing the Easter itself while it's still hot? Why can't you do that? And so Andres, keep reading.
וכן לא ייטול גם אותה חתיכה לעצמה בעודה חמה, לפי שהאיסור שבה חוזר ואוסר אותה, מה תהיה תקנתו, יניע שיצטנן ונוטל, עד כאן השונו. וכתבו רבנו בסימן תתתה ושם יתברך. Okay, and he says that you shouldn't also take out the piece that has the shuman of the Gid Hanashe when it's still hot, but you have to wait also until it's cold, because then if you take it out, then there is no shiur against it, and then it becomes again oseh.
It's osir the piece
The
of
little
meat. Right?
piece.
Yeah, you have a piece of meat with the ghee, the shuman ghee stuck to it, and you take that piece out, and it's still really hot. Well, now all the other forces that were marshaling against it are gone, and now it's going to the shuman is going to osir the piece itself, right? And that can be a problem. So you have to wait for that. That's you have to wait for everything to cool down, and then you remove the isur with the piece of meat that's mutar with it, and then you can be okay. There seems to be this sense of the question is why. Either there's a sense that you're just not allowed to create an isur, which we actually have a principle of this, like you can't intentionally try to create an isur. And the other possibility is, right, it's also, this kind of goes with this, that isur can fall back into something and become a problem again, and you don't want that. You've now created a bigger isur. So, but right, if you think, by the way, that there's an isur davuk thing going on here, then that whole piece is asur anyway. It kind of doesn't matter, but depends how you see that. So Rav Nachum asked about this, so this is what you should do. You should wait for things to cool down. And then if there's any case, right, when you have an isur that's recognizable in something, it's probably best to let everything cool down before you try dumping anything out, take the isur out, and then, move on. Okay, good. How are we doing on time? Oh, 9 minutes. So everyone feel good about these questions? These were maybe helpful questions, or?
Yeah, sure.
So, thank you to Rav Nachum for writing them for us. Good. Maybe in the 9 minutes we have, first, any questions in general about Beria? And if not, I want to take a look at one thing.
I just remember when we touched, when we began talking about Beria, and we didn't know if it had to be a little bird that you could put inside your mouth. And then we held this conversation. What if you have a dog and you eat it's ever min achai, whatever? And I don't know. It was a.
Yeah, I mean, shlemut seems to be a thing. I mean, but ever min achai also, it would be, I think we are talking about a bird. I think the Mishnah there is talking about a bird that is so small that you put it in your mouth. There's a whole thing with somebody who knows Mishnah like by heart better than me. The whole thing about also with tuma and tahara, right? With it, there's I think a whole bird is metameh biblia, right? As you swallow it in the throat, right? There's a whole thing. There is a sense of there are birds out there that you can kind of swallow in one fell swoop. So to mix Shakespeare into Gemara, because we all should do that. Good. I wanted to look at any other questions before. There's at least one Pitchei Tshuva I wanted to look at. It's actually the first Pitchei Tshuva on Kuf, Aleph on Nimala. But someone want to read that? Yavni, you're up. Your turn.
Sure. Sorry, could you say where?
Yeah, it's in the Shulchan Aruch on Kuf, Pitchei Tshuva Aleph Nimala.
נמלה. עיין בספר...
Pleti Ufleti, which is a perush on the tour.
שלמד היתר על נמלים הגדלים בפירות וקמח, שאף אם פרשו בטלים בשישים. דהרי הדבריה אינה בטלה, דווקא כשהוא אסור מתחילת בריאתו. ונמלה אין אסור מתחילת בריאתו, דהה קודם שפרשה, הייתה מותרת. עד כאן דברי הקריטי ופליטי.
Yeah.
So in the Kreti Ufleti they find a way to be matir on nemalim that grow in fruit and in flower because even if they have, I guess, they separated themselves, like I guess they're imagining that they're like growing as part of the plant organism and then like becoming independent ants. Is that the idea?
I think, yeah, or it could even be the one they're still in the vegetable itself. Imagine, I'm going to give like a more modern, the eggs hatch in the vegetable, right? Then they're still part of the vegetable or the fruit, right? But when they emerge, they become asur. But when they're still part of it, they're actually mutar.
Because because bria is only a bria if it's not, and not betela is when it's right, when it's asul from it's the beginning of its creation. But these things, because they were once part of the fruit, they were once mutar, and therefore even once they're separated, they're no longer they might be asul, but they're not a bria.
Exactly. So, all right, but keep going a little bit.
ועיין בתשובת טור האבן, סימן כ"ו, שחולק על זה, הוא פסק דמקרי בריאה ואינה בטלה. עיין שם.
Yeah, so we can
ועיין
stop. So he gives another limud zechut, he doesn't tell us what it actually is. So I'm gonna ignore for now. But you can see the debate going on here already of like, well, wait a second, are bugs, are ants really always birya? Maybe they're only birya if they came from outside. The ant trail that comes into your kitchen, that comes into my kitchen every summer, and I can't ever figure out where it comes from. He says, but if it comes from the food itself, that might be permitted. They might be able to be batel, not permitted. I don't want to say that you can eat it. That it might be permitted if it comes in, leaves the food and goes back in. So, but okay, good. So
that would mean that it's just permitted if it never left, right? If it was just part of the food.
Yeah, it's permitted while it's still in the plant. Once it leaves the plant, it becomes asur. But it was therefore started as a heter, and therefore was not always a birya. It wasn't nolad as an isur, and therefore it's not a birya, and can be batel in shishim. So, good. All right. We have time maybe for one more. Let's see if there's another good one I wanted to do here. Yeah. Let's do the next one of the Pitchei Tshuva, not from the beginning though. Maybe I'll do it. If you go like a couple lines in, it starts with it's his bet ever minachai, and he has ve'ayem besefer levushay srad. People see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll read this one. All right, so see the sefer levushay srad. Shekatav uvda have b'shochet shel kech raglei ofot בטבת ושבט, ויראה של מהרתו וריבוי העופות שחוטים שהיו מונחים לפניו, חתך גם כן רגל אחד is it avuza? Is that how you pronounce the whatever the bird is that avuza, I think. Yeah. Chaya שהייתה מונחת בין השחוטות, right? So what does he do? This is like he's doing like mass shchita here. Right, it's like it's like the ancient industrial shchita maybe, and the guy accidentally has a live bird that he cuts the leg off of and throws it in with all the legs of the other birds, right? So okay, v'nita rev regel zeh ben yoter mishishim raglei avuzot shchutot, right? So he's got a bunch of kosher legs, and this leg, which is an ever minachai, between all these other ones, right? This is all right. Ve'ashochet chesron yudiato hishlich echad miragelim ve'ashar ochlam kulam. Right. Ve'samach sheni patel regel zeh. All right. And one more thing. V'lo have ulit kabed. All right. Ki tzirich tikun shiur. All right. So what did he do? He's like, what's the fix for all of this? It's a foot isn't chaticha likabed. It must be batel, right? In this, and we'll see this later when we get like bitul of yavesh biyavesh, that maybe you take one of them and you throw it out, so you can, you have kind of a story going there that, maybe I threw out the isur, right? If anytime I'm eating something, I can tell myself I have a good chance this wasn't the isur, okay? But here's the problem, right? That's ever minachai, right? V'met ever minachai lo batel mitam birya, right? But it's not batel, right? So v'ata. Right, so clearly the eating of these, you shouldn't have eaten any of these feet of the geese feet or whatever they are, right? All right, but vatal sha'ala kelim, right? But now they asked about, well, what about we cook these? We have these isur legs that we cooked. What about them? Because remember, once it's not batel, the whole thing becomes asur, right? All of these feet are asur, and so now you cook the chicken or these geese legs or whatever they are in your pot, and your pot has blia of isur, So what do? Right? The whole community is now not only eating treif, but they've cooked treif. Okay. V'aretidim barur lo shebishum pam shebishel lo hayu shishim b'chol hakdera neged regel achat. Right? Hakelim asarim. I said, yeah. Kalim, unless you had 60 against the foot, that you can't use these kalim anymore, or you have to fix them. You have to kasher them. Achen im safek etzlo ulai haya kol panim bebishul, right? Bishul achat shishim az imutarim kalim. But if there's a safek that maybe there was 60 when he cooked it against the foot, right? Then the vessels are mutar. V'afil im noda le'ashoel din. Right? The ever mina chai lo batil be'et shadayin haya bekli Beit Yosef ayin sham be'orach beviur tam hadavar. He says, right, that even if you knew, right, that the rule was that it's not batel, then even so, the having safek that there might have been 60 renders the kli mutar. Right. And I think I didn't look into this, but my guess is right. This is what level is the Isur of Birya?
Or the issue of bitul the Rabbanan.
Good, exactly. We're doing bitul but the Rabbanan. So even bitul the Rabbanan, if you did, you might be able to be mosif, right? Potentially, and therefore it'd be mutar. So I think that's where he's getting this from.
Wait, so because it was not bataled, all of the other legs became asul, but those legs can be bataled in 60. Like even like they are not. They don't. Yeah. What's
no.
the
The legs can be bataled in 60, but the flavor that has gone into the pot
flavor? Right.
Yes. And that flavor is, and now, so if there was a safek, we were a safek the Rabbanan level at this point. So no, I think this is, this actually gets into a thing, right? If birya is not batel, everything, like your soup, right, which we were talking about, if you don't strain it, the whole soup is asur, but it doesn't mean the pot is necessarily asur. It can be, but it cannot be also. Can be, right? You might have to kasher the pot. So Alana,
why does it matter? Sorry. Oh, thank you. Why does it matter that it was or what's the significance of it being in Tevet and Shvat? Are there more chickens then or something?
Yeah, I have no clue. I think it was the Maas said that maybe that's the season when all the shlita happens. I don't know. I had no clue. So
okay. Because if it were that specific occasion, I would expect them only to say 1 month. The fact that it says 2 suggests that maybe there's something about that time of year. But okay, just yeah.
So I just assume that maybe that to the reader, that time of year was a reality of like craziness of shlita. Like there are like hundreds of birds all around. Maybe that's when these birds are these migratory birds that come back. Maybe they come back at that time. Yavi's looking at me like I'm crazy, but yeah, I don't know. It's a great question. So all right, I will stop the recording.